Hi everyone, and welcome to this live webinar. My name is Pablo Gonzalez, and I am the Marketing Director at Bellatrix Software. Today's topic is about Scrum scalability, or how to implement and manage large Scrum projects and teams. I'm sure some of you haven't heard of us before, so let me do a quick introduction. Bellatrix is a South American software innovation company with delivery centers located in Mendoza, Argentina, and Lima, Peru. A couple of months ago, we did a webinar on how to manage distributed Agile teams. If you haven't, I invite you to go to our YouTube channel and listen to the recording. That was such a great discussion and triggered so many questions that we decided to invite our guest speaker and lead Scrum trainer, Hubert Smits, to talk about large projects and teams and how to better implement Scrum in that context. Today, for this webinar, we also have Juan Pablo Calvo, also known as Colo. So welcome Hubert and welcome Juan Pablo. Would you like to introduce yourself?
All right, thank you, Fernando. Hello, everyone. I'm Juan Pablo Calvo, or Colo, as you heard. I have a bachelor's degree in computer science, and I'm a certified Scrum Master. I have been working for Bellatrix for more than 8 years now, and I'd like to talk to you about my latest projects that I've worked on. The first one was for an insurance claim application. This project was one of the first and truly agile that I've worked on. From our side, Mendoza, we were more than 30 people working all together for the same project. And about the second one, it's a customer that provides mobile banking services. At the moment, we're working with distributed teams that will be in Argentina, Peru, and the US. We also work under an agile process, and we are now working with mixed teams. That means that we have distributed teams with also distributed people. For example, developers from the US and QA from Peru, or developers from the US and Argentina, and the Scrum Master from Argentina too. Throughout this webinar, I'll be explaining how we were able to work like this and what were the challenges that we faced to get where we are now.
Okay, great, Colo, thank you a lot. Hubert, would you tell us about yourself and your vast experience?
Thank you, Fernando, and that in 1 minute. So I'll keep that short. Hubert Smits, I'm officially titled Certified Scrum Trainer, and for the past, it's now 12 years, I've been working with Scrum teams since 2005 as a trainer and do my training and coaching all around the globe. Have worked with Bellatrix for the last 4 or 5 years. Visited both their premises in Mendoza and in Lima, and the first project that Colo was talking about the insurance migration, that's where we worked together. Colo was in one of the teams and I was the program director heading up all those teams. That's it in a nutshell, and both, like Colo said, both he and I will keep using those real projects as examples and explanations throughout the whole webinar.
Okay, great, thank you. And we are very excited to have you both here. I think it's going to be a great webinar today. So to our audience, for this presentation, we'll use about 40 minutes to develop the main content. After that, we have saved some time to answer your questions. So while our speakers present the content, please make sure to type any questions you may have in the box located to the right of your screen. We'll do our best to answer all the questions. And just as a quick reminder, for all of you who are attending this session right now, we have a free discount voucher, and it's worth $100 to access Scrum trainings with Hubert Smits. So we'll send you the vouchers along with the webinar recordings and the slides once the webinar is finished. So thank you to Hubert for giving away this present for the attendees.
Yep.
And before we jump into the content, we would like to know you a little bit better. So I'm presenting a few polls here. You should see one now. and this one is about your role. So please select the best choice, whether if you're a CTO, a Scrum Master, team leader, a developer, or if you're a tester or quality assurance. Let's wait for a few more seconds for everyone to be able to select. Right, perfect. 58, just a few more seconds. Great. So as you can see here, 55% of the people today are Scrum Masters, and then followed by team leader and developers, and also we have a few CIOs and CTOs. Great. So let's go to the next poll, and this one is about your previous experience. Do you have experience working with distributed agile teams? That's a key question. Everyone's voting. Perfect. Just 1 second and we're good to go. So as you can see in the results, 71% of the people in Warrior have previous experience working with distributed agile teams, and just 29% don't have any previous experience. So that will help us target the content a little bit more. Okay, great. Thanks everyone for participating in the polls. And assuming, even though some of you may not have experience, but we will assume that everyone is familiar with the typical roles of a Scrum team, we will cover today's topics starting with the big picture. So Hubert, when should we start calling big a Scrum team or a Scrum project, and what will it look like?
Okay, let me introduce that topic, building up from something that I think pretty much everybody online will recognize on the next slide, the core Scrum model. If you look at the picture, then like I said, you'll recognize all of this, product owner with her backlog, sprint planning. In the two parts, that's an emphasis. Part one is selecting what work will be done. Part two is then for the team to find out how will we do the work. Then sprinting starts with the sprint backlog, daily meetings, and at the end we wrap up inspecting the new increment in the review and talking about how the team worked in the retrospective. I'm flying over this because you've all seen this, I assume. If we go to the next slide and talking about scaling Scrum or bigger teams, then, and that was the whole reason to put that first picture up, is you'll recognize that picture of basic Scrum or core Scrum. All the parts are still there. In a moderately scaled environment, 2, 3, 4 teams, maybe 5, there's still one product owner with her product backlog, but there's something happening with sprint planning, and that's why I highlighted it. Sprint planning part 1 is done jointly over all the teams. It takes some organizing, and in this example it's 3 teams. The 3 Scrum Masters will work with their teams to agree who will participate in sprint planning part 1. Part 1 is about selecting which work will be delivered from the backlog, and then after that joint session has finished, the Scrum Masters plus the other people from the individual teams go back to the individual teams to finish sprint planning, talking about and how will we develop all those selected user stories. After that, it is sprinting per usual. There is a sprint backlog. We run 2 to 4 week sprints, every day the daily Scrum, and a little bit of a change at the end. All the teams work towards the same goal, the same product. There was one product backlog, and that gives also one sprint review, one demo in which all 3 teams participate. Retrospectives are again separate, and you can follow that up with a joint retrospective. This is moderate scaling, 3, 4, 5 teams, but it doesn't change the Scrum process. We are not totally reinventing the wheel here. And that principle goes on if we scale even much further beyond that. And on the next slide, we can see something that I would call a Scrum program, or be working with teams of teams. We now have a repeat of that previous slide where teams of teams with 2, 3 teams in each of the branches that you see here are working on a part of the full delivery. And still not a whole lot of change. The mechanisms from the previous slide still work, but what does get added is what's highlighted here as an area product owner, supporting 10, 15 teams who all work towards the same goal, and we will later work on the explanation with that insurance project that Calvo and I worked on. You can't support that anymore with one single product owner. Yes, there is still one person overall responsible for the backlog, but he gets supported by, in this picture, 3 area product owners who own just one part of the full solution. After that, the picture is the same as on the previous slide. Sprint planning is split up over the teams who work on one component. Scrum Masters work with their teams on the second part of sprint planning, and we deliver, in the end, one shippable product increment. Sprint review, etc. is all the same as what we discussed before. So this would be the scaling model, and going back to your question, Fernando, what's big? With this model, we can support more than 100 people over 10, 15, 20 teams. If you would go far beyond that, which is possible, which I have supported as a Scrum coach in Cisco, then you would create this model, teams of teams, again and again. So it would be, again, a repeat of principally a basic core Scrum model. If we look at this model in a more real situation, let's go to the next slide, Fernando, and look at that insurance project that we keep mentioning. We removed all names of companies. That's not all that important. But this is the structure in which we organized roughly 150 people. The grouping from the previous slide is represented here as a grouping with offshore teams, people located further away, far east. Nearshore team, that's where we're talking about Bellatrix. Onshore team, we had people at headquarters. At QA grouped together, there are QAs, we'll see that later, in the individual teams, but they need to collaborate as well, and we have a collaboration of product owners. This is a real-life example of a project where we both participated. I was the guy at the top, and Calvo was in one of the teams, and to run a fast-paced delivery of a total rewrite of an insurance program. With this model in mind, I like to wrap it up here. We'll go in more detail in the next slides. But does this answer your question so far, Fernando?
Absolutely. I think it's been pretty clear, and I think that also Calvo has a slide to illustrate that real life example, right?
Yes, that's right, Fernando. If you can go to the next one, please. So basically, in my example, as Hubert mentioned, I was in one of the teams for this insurance company. So in order to give you some examples and numbers, a staff of 30 people approximately was hired, including 2 Scrum Masters. This was a large-sized project, and its development took almost 2 years. This company has an existing and working Agile process which made working experience with them easier than other projects. So we had our first challenge, and as you can see, one of the ways that we had to figure out is how to implement Scrum within 30 people. If you get one of the points of Scrum that says that it's supported for small teams, 7 plus or minus 2 people. So according to Scrum, this distribution is not supported, so the following proposal was made. We split the whole group into 4 teams led by 2 Scrum Masters. All 4 teams were working as one big team. With, although we had different user stories, we shared the same goals. And each Scrum Master supported 2 teams. And each team had a lead developer and QA coordinating the work. Could be from Argentina or the US, as you can see on the chart. We have also the application architect supporting the team as well. And later on, as you can see at the bottom left, you will see a lead QA PM. That was a role that was introduced later because we found out that we had to contain all the work and coordinate that work from QA as well. And that role worked very well. So now, in order to keep track of all these teams, you may ask how we do it. So one of the ways to do it is throughout the Scrum of Scrums that I think Hubert can elaborate a little bit more.
Okay. Yeah, and I think the question for Hubert now is how do you assign that ambassador, that Scrum of Scrums, and how also is that meeting different from the daily Scrum meeting?
Okay, yes, I can do that. Would you mind going back to the previous slide, because then I can really point at a few things for the people in the audience. I think if you visit a Scrum Master training or a Product Owner training, that you will often get the answer to your question that the Scrum Masters will participate in the Scrum of Scrums after they have conducted their own daily Scrum meeting with their own team. And that works well. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that in my projects, I would certainly expect the Scrum Masters to be there. Yet, if you think about what's the role of a Scrum, the role of a daily meeting, a Scrum, is to keep the team going. If somebody is stuck with a problem, that the other team members can suggest ways forward, not the in-depth discussions, etc. But it is about keeping the team rolling, and whoever hears a problem that he or she can help with, they offer assistance. That same principle is applied to the Scrum of Scrums. It is about keeping this whole group of people that we currently see on the screen, who are together responsible for producing a new claims processing system, to help each other. The Scrum Master can often represent the team and can explain what's happening, where's progress made, and what was finished, and can even phrase a few problems. But if one of your developers has got something to explain, I am totally open to bring that developer or that QA person into the Scrum of Scrums. And if you have a solution where you have a business analyst or an individual product owner in your remote teams, I think those are excellent people to come along to the Scrum of Scrums. In this picture, that's represented by what we called application architect. I think that those people, I would welcome them and motivate them to come along in the Scrum of Scrums, because they are key to solutions and key to helping the teams progressing. That can make for a larger meeting. In a smallest possible setting, this group would have a Scrum of Scrums with the 2 Scrum Masters and probably the 2 project leads for the nearshore group, and that's it. I think in reality, for the most of the Scrum of Scrums that we were conducting in this project, it would be more typical a group of about 10 to 12 people, because others would come along. That's my selection, my view on selecting people for the Scrum of Scrums.
Okay, great, perfect. And Calvo, how did it work in your past project?
Well, in this example, I was working in the QA area by that time. So, as you saw in that chart, there were 2 Scrum Masters attending to that Scrum meeting, but also there was the lead QA. So that role made the thing easier for our area, because we were able to communicate all the dependencies, the risks, the needs to that role, and she was the person who was invited to the Scrums and communicated those challenge or problems to the meta Scrum Master, in order to say that. And they were also working on fixing our problems. So in this case, as Hubert mentioned, some of the roles that were invited to participate on the meeting can be achieved. And I think it's very important the role of also the, so to speak, the meta Scrum Master, or the guy who organizes these Scrums in those meetings, following the action items and risks. I think it's very important because otherwise it doesn't make any sense to follow and not to provide some solutions to the problems.
Okay. And currently, how do you deal with this?
Now, as you can see, we have an example in the screen. We have a similar process. It's based on a bi-weekly meeting. Basically, the regular audience are the Scrum Masters, product owners, and product managers. And sometimes a day before, topics are reviewed, and the audience may be expanded depending on the topics that we are going to be discussing and depending on the urgency of the matters. We can invite the lead developers or QAs, architects, some technical referrals. But mainly we talk about risk and dependencies and check if these are being followed and resolved from one meeting to another, as I said in the previous meeting.
Okay, perfect. And I can imagine that like in any regular Scrum team with large projects, you also need to keep registry of everything that happens. So where do you register the integration between, the integration activities between teams? And are those tasks also included in every Scrum team backlog?
Yeah, we keep track of everything. If you can go to the next slide, please. So our support comes from, depending on the project or the client, some different tools that allows the Agile methodologies. So there are, in this case, you can see some tasks within a user story that allows us to know which is the current status of the user story and who's working on that. So if you can go to the next one. And the next one is more like overall status. You will have all the user stories that are organized within a sprint. Also, all the data and sensible information has been deleted. But as you can see on the on your right, you will see the version of each user story that belongs. So by using this, you can gather metrics, you can get more accurate estimates, you can determine the capacity of the team, how well they are going, if they are over capacity or under capacity. So it's easier to track using these kind of tools.
Right, perfect. And what would you say are the planning activities for large-scale development efforts then?
Yeah, I think I can say something to that, Fernando. You've already noticed from the explanation around Scrum of Scrums that communication is and collaboration between the teams is key in a large project. That I represent in my planning structure as well. In core Scrum, if you read the articles from the Scrum Alliance and from Ken Swaber, you will only read about sprint planning, and in the model we saw all the way in the beginning when I was talking about how teams of teams are collaborating, I split up sprint planning and said the teams together do the first part, discussing what will be done, and then individual teams will talk about how will we do this. That's often writing out the tasks. That selecting at sprint planning time which stories will be developed, that works and it gives a lot of flexibility. What I'm often missing in it is an early realization of how the work is best structured, because we can talk about it longer or shorter, but there are often dependencies between a number of pieces of work. And doing the work in an order that's been thought over is usually helpful. We don't really want to go to micro-planning like we used to do in our bad old days, I would say, with a bit of a joke, with very detailed project plans, but projecting which team is doing which work, which stories when. That's what I address in release planning. That's what's currently on the slide. And the idea of release planning is for a foreseeable future. That's why I talk about 2 to 4 months. Projecting all the work or as much work as will fit from the product backlog over the multiple teams, and that's here represented with 3 flows of sprint cycles. So we have 3 teams working together here. Projecting that work over the 3 teams and within a single team, projecting it in the right sprint, and that way taking care of dependencies. The whole idea here is not to command and control and tell teams what to do when, but it is giving the teams an opportunity to look at the prioritized product backlog and recognizing how they can optimize throughput per team and per sprint by ordering the features in such a way that it solves dependencies where they can reuse each other's results, where they can do fast integrations, etc. And it's therefore not a release planning session with just the Scrum Masters or with just a few specialists. It is an all-team activity, which can be a challenge. In the example of the insurance company and the Mendoza teams, all those 30 people were in a virtual meeting for a couple of hours to structure all those stories on their claims processing backlog. But that's what's happening in release planning, and I find that very helpful in getting a good flow of work through all of the teams. Does that work for you, Fernando?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me share again with the audience that you can ask questions in the box located to the right of your screen while Hubert and Calvo are still sharing the content. Continuing with the presentation, I think that we should jump then to demos and retrospectives. So how and when are demos and retrospectives implemented?
Okay, basically the demos are implemented at the end of the sprints regularly, and also after a sprint is done you get the retrospective. The demo is when you show all the work done, all the user stories, and you get the final acceptance from the product owner. And after that, you get with the team and you organize the retrospective in order to give the closure to the sprint. And you can either follow the things that needs to be improved from one sprint to another, and then make the monitoring from one sprint to another to see if those things were improved or not. So here we'll have an example of pre-demos. So you may ask, what are pre-demos? So this is an example that we got with the first project. Since we have large development project, we used to have like 1 month duration sprints. So that was a lot of work done, a lot of user stories, stories too big. The thing is that when we got to the demos, mainly on the first sprints where we were knowing each other and getting familiar with the application, a lot of user stories were rejected from the POs. So that generated a lot of carryover from one sprint to another, and also impact on the team's morale as well, because it was a huge amount of work that was rejected and needs to be redone. So one of the solutions that we implemented was this, as you see, the pre-demos. That means that, let's suppose that you are a week away from the demo, or just 3 days from the demo. You organize an informal meeting with the PO where you show all the progress. It will be the same thing as the demo, but with an informal occasion where you show all the progress, and that will give you time if you need to make some corrections and just to get a better understanding, even though let's say the user story says something and some of the developer might misunderstood the acceptance criteria, so that will give you some time gap in order to fix and test that user story. So that impacted in a positive way in our teams. A lot of the user stories were accepted, and also that impacted directly on the team's morale, and the team was very motivated as well. So we thought that that was very valuable for that experience.
Okay, and let's keep in mind that we are talking about distributed teams. So from your experience, how do you address the challenges of that geographical distribution for the team members?
Well, regarding that challenge that we had to deal, we have some, if you can go to the next slide, please. Okay. All right, so we have several scenarios that we have to deal with. We had some teams in different countries with different areas, developers and QA, for instance. We have the other scenario that we have the same office and different physical space, different floors or branches. Some companies with different states or countries, like we have in Argentina and Peru. And the most common one is different companies and different time zones. So Scrum talks about having the whole team in the same place, and that would be the ideal scenario. But in reality, we know that this barely gets achieved because of the nearshore or offshore team working with the US. So let's analyze this scenario through our company experience, the pros and the cons, and the best way to guide a project to success. For all the scenarios mentioned before, we might encounter the similar challenges such as the work distribution, tasks and responsibilities, keep an effective communication, a cultural gap in the wake of work is like thinking outside the box, and the language, of course. So throughout the time we've learned in an incremental way how to tackle all of these challenges, and also to leverage on some of them to be more productive. In regards to time zone, example, we have the US and India, where they work either at night or there's a big time gap between those countries. In order to maximize our working capacity, we had our team distributed between San Francisco and Lima and Mendoza, for instance. This distribution had a time gap of 2 hours between each office. From San Francisco to Lima, 2 hours, and from Lima to Mendoza, 2 hours. So that gives a lot of productive time. So when having a distributed team, it's very important that the task distribution and the size of them, also to monitor that their progress goes as planned. Despite Scrum defines certain roles, it is important to have some kind of referral person. Normally, that would be the senior person, the guy with most experience in the project. And it's very important, especially for new teams, like the technical referral. Okay. So, also as a Scrum Masters, it is important to be able to detect those profiles inside of the teams and develop their presence to them. In order to, if you want to aim to performance teams, it's very important to know that. So that was one of the aspects that we deal with distributed teams, and we were able, in our way, to manage and keep working with that.
Okay, great. It's been fantastic. And I think that just to make it very clear to our audience, because I see some questions here. What's the difference between the Scrum of Scrums and the Mid-Scrum?
Yeah, I think I can say something about it. One difference is just language. Scrum of Scrums is commonly recognized as a practice, as a meeting that is used by a lot of teams, larger teams, to communicate between the teams. And the picture is on screen now. If we are distributed over multiple locations and we're working on the same product, then the individual teams, Denver team, Mendoza team, Lima team, have their daily meeting. And once they're all done, then the representatives, and we talked about that earlier in the webinar, get together to keep the whole group going, to keep product development over the multiple teams going. That's a classic Scrum of Scrums, and you can give it some additions, like what Calvo was talking about with the pre-demo, etc. But this is the mechanism to collaborate between multiple teams. A Meta Scrum is a name a bit less frequently used. I think it was originally coined by Jeff Sutherland, saying that if a group like this with 3 teams working on a large delivery, claims processing for an insurance company, then there needs to be a structure in which company management, client management can hook up with the delivery, with the project, if you like. And that went by the name of a Meta Scrum. Whether you want to use the name Meta Scrum or you want to use the good old name of steering committee is identical to me, and I'm comfortable with both. And in the insurance company, we did call it a steering committee meeting. Difference is that meeting up with the steering committee, with the Meta Scrum, is typically a few days after the sprint ends and not every day. Unless the development work is really in a tight spot, we're close to launch, close to go live, or things are extremely difficult, we need a lot of help from upper management in the organization, then I would do it more often, and I have done it daily in the past, but that was by exception. Whereas a Scrum of Scrums, typically daily, I would motivate the teams to do that on a daily basis. Also, the structure is different. In the Scrum of Scrums, we still use the questions from a Scrum. What did you do today? What did you do yesterday? What's the plan for today? And what is the blocks for the team? And that would drive that meeting. It would still stick to 15 minutes, whereas a meta scrum can be larger. It's the times that I've implemented it, it would typically be the program lead, the program director, whatever title goes there, and working sometimes with Scrum Masters, typically with the product owners, typically with a lead architect, explain what's going on in the whole program, so over the 120, 150 people. And if we turn to the next slide, then I've mocked it up. So the data you see here is totally made up, but this would be an example of the brief report that I would be using. Quick summary of what happened during a sprint, what was delivered, what's concluded, what's going on, what are the challenges, the blocks, if you like, where is help needed, and then highlighting some major decisions. At the meta Scrum level, there is not an interest in detail or detailed individual burn-up charts, etc. I have used the program burn-up charts as a technique here. All those things are welcome, but it is about the whole program. If you go to the next slide, it typically shares some more data around budget, because a program on time, on schedule is one thing, but you could do that by either cutting corners and leave a whole lot of defects in the system, and that's going to cause trouble later, or you could do it by burning too much budget too soon. And that's why I talk about how is our budget being spent here. And in the third slide that I would use as a report to my steering committee, which is on the next one, Fernando, if you can click, yeah, an overview of the risks. There is a lot of classic project management work going on here. That's absolutely true. I think that a good project program manager will not see a lot of surprises in a Scrum program, in a large-scale Scrum implementation. There's a different rhythm, a different cadence. Every 2 weeks we have an update of the product. Meeting structures will be aligned with that cadence. We are very heavy driven by the results of the teams and not by the documentation of the teams. But these are just good project management practices that, yeah, I still believe in. So that would be my interpretation and my implementation of a meta Scrum.
Okay, perfect. And then I have two questions for you, Hubert. Related to your experience. The first one, what's the biggest team size you've worked with? And also, if as the team size grows, is the performance jeopardized?
Team sizes. This Ballotex program, I had program delivery responsibilities and was one of the larger one that I've done with Scrum. Very early in my career, I've built a bank with a Scrum-like process. It's so long ago that Scrum wasn't even popular. It was at the time of the signing of the Agile Manifesto, the early 2000s. But hands-on program experience or responsibility, somewhere around 140 people. As a lead consultant with Cisco voice technology, it was around 1,500 people in total. But I was not responsible for content there. I was responsible to help redesign the whole software development lifecycle, the whole program structure. They came out of a heavy waterfall project structure with 15-month projects running and overrunning grossly. And we scaled that back to a workflow of monthly sprints and quarterly release deliveries and a reduction of final test time to about a third of what they used to do in the past, and the overruns in their programs were virtually brought to a halt. So those are the largest things I've worked with. I think it's more realistic to talk about the effect of team size growth in that Bellatrix-like project. Yeah, one of the team characteristics is that what they usually say, never change a winning team. That's for a reason. Changing a winning team gives a disruption, and people need to work out their agreements, their team agreements, their standards again. That doesn't have to be a huge deal, but it's definitely costing you some performance. And in general, when I start up with a team, whether it's distributed or not, but we're talking distributed, so let me take that as an example. The first 3 months, I don't count on productivity. That's not to say that there isn't productivity, there definitely is, but this is the moment where the team changes a lot. New people come on board all the time, need to be brought up to speed. We see some people moving from the one team to the other. That's where you see that changing teams, growing teams is definitely costing you some performance. So yeah, that's team growth, and I like to focus on that, concentrate that at the beginning of the program, taking care of the people, of their training, of their involvement with the whole project, and then it's workable and it gives good results.
Okay, perfect. And we're getting close here to the top of the hour. I think we still have a little bit more of content that we wanted to share with everyone, and probably we will be extending a little bit over the hour to answer all the questions that we're receiving. But continuing with the presentation, and I think this is also key for the audience. You authored a great article about the 5 levels of planning. So I guess you also need to tweak that approach when working with big Scrum teams, right?
To some extent, yes. Certainly if it gets seriously big, like the 140 people in the insurance project. But the 5 levels article, and we'll send it off after the webinar to everybody. And it was always intended to answer questions about how to scale Scrum. The article is older, it's now 5-6 years old since I wrote it, but it's still a very good structure, a very good lead for how to organize product development if you're looking at something big, because Scrum doesn't want to do big things all at once. That's a waterfall project. Scrum wants focus of the team on just a few weeks of work, and Scrum is very strong in supporting a single team with a single product owner and working for 2-3 weeks and then having a next shippable product. Scaling that needs a bit more planning, and that's where 5 levels comes in. That's where you work from a vision to rewrite an insurance system, the total rewrite, to a roadmap that projects which parts of the insurance suite gets rewritten when and how many people do we need, and some first rough estimates, to then focus on just one step on the roadmap, typically about 3 months worth of work, with multiple teams, to do that release planning session that we talked about earlier, where the multiple teams synchronize their work, and then we drop into sprint planning and the daily Scrum as per usual core Scrum setup. That's my structure. I would say that it doesn't get a lot of tweaking, but a lot more focus in a large project. And that's where you see that if we click to the next and to the last slide, If we look at how the release planning is done, that becomes a lot of information. And when I did this in the insurance project and with other large organizations, it's got something like a full year Gantt chart with multiple teams and lots of high-level requirements on it. In that Gantt chart, I can't call it anything else. It's a great way to visualize what you intend to do in your large-scale project. You just stop using it as a project management tool. That's where Scrum and the Scrum processes totally take over. But that's my interpretation, my use of the 5 levels document to the day, to work that I still do on a day-to-day basis.
Perfect, great. And I think the content you shared, both Hubert and Calvo, has been great today. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we're getting to the end of this webinar. But if you would like to stay with us, we will extend a little bit over the time to answer the questions. So I think we're ready now. We can jump into the Q&A part of the session. Okay. First question that I have here, it's from Steven, and this one says, how long did it take to adapt this methodology for a large team, for the larger team you work with? I think this one is for Hubert.
How long did it take? Yeah, almost answering the question with the question, does it ever stop? It needs continuous attention to adopt that core Scrum model, which is so simple and so much focused on the single team, and to, on the one hand, keep that simplicity, which is such a great thing, to keep that first and foremost, and at the same time adapt in terms of, boy, if I have a mix of people between Denver and Mendoza and I need to do a stand-up meeting, then I will have to rely a bit more on a tool to communicate. And product owners are defined as people who own the product, who are part of the organization. But on the other hand, teams have to be co-located, and now I have a customer organization in say Denver, and a Mendoza team. Then I have to make that product owner travel and communicate a lot with the team. It never stops, the learning. We did a lot of groundbreaking work around the very big scale projects in Cisco. To give you an impression, I spent about 9 months there, and in the 9 months we went from 15 months waterfall projects with 1,500 people, and usually missing a go-live date by approximately 3 to 6 months. We went to 3-month releases and 1 month sprint sessions over the same size project in about 9 months. That's where we, with a good group of people, that's definitely not tooting my own horn, that was working with program managers in the PMO who knew the organization inside out, who knew the programs inside out, and with support from directors who wanted this whole waterfall process to change. We did some groundbreaking work, and it took us about 9 months. At that point I had to leave due to some internal Cisco issues that some of you probably have read about in the press. But I would have loved to spend another 9 months there to work it all out to a complete flow throughout 1,500 people in a program. That's the scale of reorganization work you're looking at?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I hope we answered that one. Next question is from Hannah. How important is the role of the ambassador or technical specialist? Would you like to take that, Colo?
Sure. It's very important. As I mentioned on the presentation, you need to get the support of that role, especially because if you're managing a lot of teams, it's almost too hard to contain that amount of people. So, in other words, it's kind of crucial to lean on this person, and this will be the guy who will be also representing you just sometimes in the scrums, being like your second in hand. So for me, it's very important, this role, especially as for team formation, when you have this new group of people becoming a team itself. So it will bring up the knowledge, the technical knowledge, sometimes the human knowledge, how to contain the expectations. So yeah, it's kind of like an informal role of a Scrum Master that will help you guide the whole team and the project itself.
Perfect, great. Okay, perfect. Let's start with the next one. And this one is from Paresh, and it says, what tools do you recommend for managing distributed teams? And before you answer that, I have a second one about what calendar tools do you usually use? So maybe we can answer both together.
Sure.
Okay. Want me to go first, Colo? Tools, a bit a mixed answer. I said earlier in the talk that with distributed teams you do need some more tooling to share information. That's absolutely true. You can make your choice out of a fairly large list of available Agile tools. Maybe you're driven from your existing development environment. If you're a Microsoft shop, then Team Foundation Server is likely your tool of choice. If you have something really big with all the program management needs to be done in the tool, you're looking at high-end tools like a version 1 and a Rally. More moderate size projects, Jira is very popular and it's got a good price functionality balance. But having said all that, that does not mean that the simple tools go by the wayside. I've worked with large customers, and I mentioned Cisco, General Electric, similar size projects and programs, and it was common, it was a rule in the GE teams that I worked in, that besides using a high-end tool, and everybody would have licenses and it was well used, that every team had a burn-down chart for their sprint on paper. They would have a task board with post-it notes in their team room. And stand-up meetings were not in front of a projector, but were around the paper tools. Release planning, yes, you can do it in the high-end tools. And in some cases, some instances, it's necessary, it really helps. But if you have a full local team in Mendoza, then I would encourage the Mendoza team to do release planning with post-it notes, and then afterwards we'll have to type it up in the tool so we can communicate with headquarters in San Francisco. But that's that would be my answer. Yes, there are a number of popular tools. Make your choice, do some research. Don't forget about the simple tools. And as a last lesson, a fool with a tool is still a fool. You first need to get your process worked out, and then any tool will work. Just a spreadsheet can go a long ways. So first get your process right. That would be my last recommendation with this question.
Perfect. Would you like to add something, Colin?
Yeah, just a few more comments, as you were mentioned. There are a lot of open source tools that will help you to guide you through the process and just to provide enough support for the work. In our case, we have worked with Rally and Jira.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in Jira, there's a plugin called Hubert that will help you to work with the Agile. It will help you to create those burn downs, and it's very useful.
Okay. Perfect. Great. Thank you, Hubert. Thank you, Calvo. It's been a great webinar, and you've shared a lot of really valuable content. I think that will be our last question because we're ahead out of time. So if there were additional questions that were not answered, or you would like more information on the topic, please contact us. We'll gladly answer your questions and follow up with any extra information you may need. Also, we will share a link to the slides and the video recording shortly. In that email, you will also find the instructions for your free Scrum training discounted voucher. Again, thanks everyone for joining. It's been a pleasure, and stay tuned for future live events and fresh content releases from Metrics. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful rest of the day.